A trip to the grocery store for most of us is a simple errand. You're thinking about dinner, wondering if you need milk, maybe grabbing a snack. But for a correctional officer, that same trip is a tactical assessment. Who's standing a little too close? Whose hands are buried in their pockets? Where are all the exits? I am Carey Randall here with Beyond the Badge Inside the Bars. I'm going to give a few examples of how corrections has changed people's lives outside of the gates. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, put them down below. And don't forget to like and share and subscribe to this channel. Now, when you see your entire workday is spent managing threats, anticipating violence, you can't just clock out. That grocery store aisle becomes another cell block, and every stranger is a potential inmate you once knew. This is the story of how a job designed to keep people locked in ends up keeping the officers themselves locked on. For those of you that wears the uniform inside our jails and prisons, the end of a shift isn't an escape. It's just a change of location. The psychological armor they have to wear for 8, 12, or even 16 hours a day doesn't come off. It fuses to them. Today, we're not just looking for or looking at the job of a correctional officer. We're exploiting the profound life-altering realities of what happens when the prison gates open and they step back into the real world, forever changed. The constant threat assessment, hypervigilant in the public. The first thing that bleeds into an officer's life is a state of mind called hypervigilance. Inside a prison, it's a survival tool. It's a constant high alert state. You need to notice a subtle shift in an inmate's posture, a quiet exchange of contraband, or the rising tension in the room before it explodes. It's what keeps them safe, but the brain doesn't have an off switch for that tool, so it stays active all the time. Imagine going to a restaurant with your family. Most people are looking at the menu, trying to figure out what they want to eat. But a correctional officer, on the other hand, is scanning the room, instinctively mapping it out. They're noting where all the exits are, flagging anyone who seems agitated or tracking who's watching the door. They'll always choose the seat that puts their back to the wall, giving them a clear view of the entrance, a habit forged in the chaos of the prison cafeteria. This isn't a conscious choice. It's a conditioned reflex. The outside world becomes a series of potential threats that needs to be managed. A crowded movie theater isn't entertainment. It's a tactical problem with limited visibility. Imagine yourself at a kid's soccer game. It isn't just a game. It's an open field with an unpredictable crowd, humming with a low level of anxiety. Always being on guard is exhausting. It chips away your ability to relax, to be present with your family, and to enjoy the very freedom of your job is supposed to protect. This constant fight or flight readiness is more than just mentally draining. It's a biological process. The body is flooded with stress hormones that are great in a crisis, but damaging over time. And when an officer finally gets home, the pendulum can swing to the opposite extreme. The hypervigilant officer becomes detached, isolated, and emotionally numb. A phenomenon some experts call biological roller coaster. The ghost in the machine, psychological conditioning. Beyond the tactical mindset of hypervigilance, there's a deep psychological transformation. The daily exposure to violence, manipulations, and the raw human suffering can rewire an officer sees in the world and everyone in it. Correctional officers face staggering rates of mental health challenges. Studies shows that up to a third of officers suffer through post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, a rate comparable to those some cases higher than the military veterans returning from combat. Rates of depression are also incredibly high, affecting more than a quarter of the officers. These aren't just statistics. They represent a hidden epidemic of pain. An officer might witness a dozen of traumatic events in a career, assault, suicide, medical crisis, and be expected to just carry on as nothing has happened before. That cumulative trauma doesn't just go away. This constant exposure leads to burnout marked by deep emotion exhaustion. In a world where manipulation is currency, trust becomes a liability. An inmate who seems friendly might be spotting you up for an assault. A polite request could just be a distraction. This learned suspicion is a necessary shield inside the prison, but it becomes a destructive wall in personal relationship. It makes it hard to accept kindness at face value and to build that casual trust that friendship and family really depends on. On top of all of that, a culture of silence often stops officers from seeking help. There's a deep-seated fear of being seen as weak or unfit for duty, a stigma that could end a career. In one study, more than half of officers said they wouldn't ask their employer for help managing stress. So the trauma festers in silence, growing until it becomes unmanageable, and it spills into every corner of their lives. Now the body keeps score. The physical toll. The mind and body are connected, and the chronic stress of correctional work shows up in devastating physical ways. The state of hypervigilance isn't just a feeling, it's a psychological reality that floods the body with adrenaline and cortisol, day in and day out. The sustained states of high alert takes a brutal toll correctional officers have. High rates of hypertension, heart attacks, ulcers, and other stress-related illnesses. The constant tension, the disruption sleep, and the rotating shifts and the psychological weight all contributes to the body breaking down from the inside out. Sleep is rarely a refuge. Insomnia and poor sleep quality is common, often tied directly to the anxiety, PTSD that haunts so many officers. They lie awake at night, their minds still scanning for threats, unable to find peace even in their own bedroom. The most shocking statistic is one about the life expectancy. While the exact number are debated and based on older data, studies have repeatedly pointed to a significant shorter life of a correctional officer, with a widely cited estimate putting their average life expectancy at 59 years. A stark contrast in the national average of 75. They spend their careers managing the lives of others, only to have their own cut tragically short. The walls come home, impact on relationship. Maybe the most heartbreaking consequences of this job is the demand it does to an officer's family and personal relationship. The very trait that keeps them alive at work, emotion detachment, suspicions, and authoritative presence, are toxic at their homes. Officers often talk about how hard it is to turn it off. The correctional officer persona that comes home and interacts with their family like their inmates, creating a rigid, rule-based environment. This might look like being overly strict with their kids, demanding unquestionable obedience, or just being emotional, unavailable. A spouse or partner can start to feel like a single parent, struggling to connect with someone who is physically there but emotionally miles away. Family events that should be fun become just another environment to be scanned and secured, leading to a social withdrawal and isolation. Arguments can become more frequent as the officers learned communication styles, direct confrontation, designed to de-escalate, or when verbal standoff is brought into the living room, it's almost impossible to explain the realities of a job to a loved one without traumatizing them. So many officers just don't. This silence creates a huge gulf of misunderstanding and loneliness. The family knows something's wrong, but they can't grasp the depth of the horror their lives' loved one faces every day. The strain contributes to the higher rates of divorces and domestic conflict. To cope with it all, some officers turn to alcohol or substance abuse, which only deepens the cracks in their family's life and personal health. The officers are trapped in a cycle of trauma, and the isolation ends up pulling their life or loved ones into a kind of prison with them, building invisible walls inside their own home. Now, the fear of recognition, off-duty security risk. The threat of an officer faces don't just disappear at the prison gate. A constant low-level fear that follows them everywhere is the possibility of being recognized in the public by a former inmate or their associate. This isn't paranormal. It's a real occupation hazard. An encounter at a gas station, a grocery store, or a restaurant can escalate into a dangerous confrontation in seconds. Because of this, officers are focused to live with a heightened sense of personal security. They learn to change their daily routine, avoid certain parts of town, and might even have to explain to their kids why they can't go to certain places. They check under the cars before getting in and scanning the parking lots as they walk into the front door. The threat isn't always direct violence. It could be intimidation, harassment, or threats made against their family. Knowing that someone you once had authority over is now free creates a unique and persistent anxiety. It reinforces the idea they're never truly safe, that the job and its dangers are always just one chance encounter away. This fear of retaliation solidifies an us versus them mentality, further isolating them from a public that can't possibly understand the reality. Every stranger is a potential threat, and every public space holds a potential danger. A fact for a correctional officer, the shift never really ends. The challenges we have discussed today are a heavy burden, and it's one that thousands of officers and their families carry in silence. If you're a current or former officer or a family member of those stories sounds familiar, please think about and sharing it in the comments below. Tell me how you coped with it in the comments. Building a community of understanding is one of the most powerful things we can do. And if this video has given you a new perspective, please subscribe to the channel and learn more about the hidden realities of our justice system. Once again, I'm Carey Randall, Beyond the Badge, Inside the Bars. Thanks for watching.